What's going on, guys? It's RETICLE OG here, and on today's video I have a how to win more gunfights video with each example along with the tip that I'm giving you guys. It took me a long time to get all these clips together, so I hope that you guys find something that makes you better in this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and make sure to like the video. And with that, let's get into the video. Thanks, guys. So tip number one is going to be practice in training or go into training mode. So I really enjoy going into the training center when my teammates are in game and I'm waiting, but I still want to get warm up. I just don't want to sit in the lobby. Go into training and practice shooting at the target with all types of guns, with an emphasis on the main guns that you guys like, whether that be the R301, the wingman. Use the guns that you most likely are always going to trade out guns for to pick up and run. One of the many cool things about training is that you can also get practice with guns that you won't get all the time in the game, like the Kraber, Mastiff, the L-Star, guns that are really game-changing and can change gunfights for you. I recommend you guys pick those up, put a lot of rounds to those care package weapons, so that way in game you're comfortable picking up the Kraber and dropping that R99. You're comfortable picking up the Mastiff, and it's going to help out your squad and yourself as well. This is going to also help you when you jump into training and you practice with those guns. You're going to learn their bullet drops, you're going to learn their recoil patterns, besides the R301, which is now random, but we'll talk about that. The damage distances, when you have one in the game, you are familiar with the mechanics. The more you play it, the more you use it, the better you'll be with that gun. So jump into training mode and start just shooting everything with all of your main guns. That's my first tip. Second tip is something that's been in games for a long time, and that's head glitching. This is a timeless tactic that is used in almost every single FPS shooter, and most of you watching this are already aware what head glitching is. If you have a head glitch, always take it. The less of yourself that is exposed, the harder it is for them to land their shots, which means that you have an advantage in that gunfight. So always take the head glitch when you can instead of exposing yourself. Third tip is going to be having high ground. Having high ground is another thing that's been in FPS shooters, and it's always a good thing to have. You know, being able to shoot down on an enemy, being able to dip back and heal real quick. Having high ground is such an important thing that you want to always make sure that you have. And also when the enemy has high ground, you also want to take that into consideration when you're pushing, when you're trying to go up against that guy, because they do have an advantage on you. It's really easy for someone to drop back and reload, to drop back and heal when you're down and you're trying to aim up and trying to predict where they're at. So definitely try to take high ground. Tip number 4 is going to be something called, I called it gun switching, but you can call it whatever you want. And this is when you have one gun out and you shoot your whole clip into the enemy, and instead of going for the reload animation, you switch to your secondary and take a shot. So I have a clip in here. I think I'm in Skull Town and I get rushed by a squad, and the last guy, I go through my whole clip and I have to switch out to my wingman. So you're going to see that in this video, and it's basically just not going through that reload animation. It's a lot faster when you have to reload, and it's a lot faster when you switch to that secondary instead of going through that reload animation. Now we're going to move on to a little bit more advanced tips here. And so my next tip is going to be strafing while shooting your weapon. A lot of you guys know about this, but strafing is another one of those staple movements that has been in FPS games for some time. For those of you who don't know what this is, that's moving back and forth while firing to make yourself a harder target to hit. So basically strafing left and right. Some guns allow you to strafe faster than others, like the wingman, the alternator, a lot of pistols, and some guns you can't really strafe as much. But strafing even a little bit is going to give you an advantage in those long range gunfights when someone's sniping at you, and in those short range gunfights when you're moving a lot with that wingman. It's just a harder target to hit, making you a harder kill and giving you more time to get that kill. Next is going to be knowing when to hip fire. Now this can be a tricky one, but it can pay off for you if you really get good at it. So hip fire in this game is actually extremely useful. It's been nerfed a lot, but it's still a very good thing to utilize when you can. Not only is it accurate at certain range, but you can also move freely compared to ADS. And like I said, so strafing is a lot easier when you're hip firing with guns, which is going to make you a harder target. And it's going to help you win those 1v1s. So start trying to realize when hip fire is useful and apply it to the end of your gunfights or the beginning. Sometimes hip firing is better than ADSing because that person's really, really in your face and you can't really track them when you're ADSing. So you're going to have to hip fire. So knowing when to ADS and when to hip fire is going to win you a lot more gunfights. Another one is called, I call it repositioning, but you can call it, moving to a different location. And there's going to be times during a gunfight when you are going down and you're going to want to change position. That person's hitting you for more at that certain point. So for example, if you're in a spot and take a good amount of damage, you should probably move from that spot, because chances are that the enemy may push you, may throw a nade, or they could call you out to a nearby teammate if you're playing in a game like squads or ranked. Or what if you've been shooting at an enemy peeking from a wall and they duck back in and move from where you are and try to get an angle or prepare yourself for their next peek and get some easy shots. Instead, you can just staying there, you can reposition yourself and not make yourself an easy angle. You know, you're in a different location, so they thought you're maybe behind this rock and maybe you moved over to the pill, and so you know you're able to get the angle on them when they think they have you. So make sure that you're repositioning yourself, not always staying in the same spot, because then you know you make yourself open to so many different factors of losing that gunfight. My next tip is going to be having the right gun for the right situation. Now, battle royales are situational and strategic, and you need to do both really well. That's why you should always try to have the best possible gun for the situation. If you are entering a house, you don't want to enter the house with your sniper rifle out. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're entering that house with your, your short range weapon, your R99, your R301, your Prowler. Don't enter houses, and also don't be in long range distances with something that's not long range, right? You want to make sure that you're giving yourself the best possible chance to win that gunfight in any scenario. So make sure that you have the right gun for the right situation. My next tip is going to be paying attention to in-game sounds or situational awareness. The game is designed to make you hear multiple sounds at the same time. And some of these sounds can be indicators as to whether you should stick in a fight or not. They can also help you when somebody may be flanking you, right? Say you have your aim down sight at a certain enemy and you hear somebody coming up behind you, you're probably going to want to focus on the guy behind you first and then re-aim at the guy that you're initially shooting at. So just pay attention to in-game sounds. If you heard something, you probably did hear something, so just check on it. If you hear any type of footsteps, any type of rush, bushes rattling, anything that you may hear, it's probably worth checking. Now we're going to move on to some advanced tips and some things that will really help you out. So my first one, I call this reticle readiness. This is placing the gun reticle when not in ADS pointed at the spot when you believe an enemy is going to show up. For example, I have a clip that I'm going to show you guys, and it's me going into pit, and I'm pointing my sights at a area where I most likely think an enemy will be coming from. I see oftentimes when I'm watching players play, they're running through certain positions and their reticle's pointed at the ground, or they're running through a house and they're looting and they're looking at the ground, when you should really be looking at where enemies should be coming from, because it's going to be so much easier for you to just press aim down sight when someone's coming through a door and you're already there, compared to snapping your analog stick up trying to get to that place where they're at. So just make sure that you have your reticle in a place where you think the enemy is going to be coming from at all times. If you're walking from the bottom up to stairs in one of those houses down by right outside a bunker, you want to make sure that your reticle is aimed upwards towards the stairs, or maybe on that little ledge where somebody watches down, because you're not going to want to have to snap aim up there. If they peek up, you just got to aim down sight and you beam them. So really make sure that you're always aiming where you think an enemy is going to be coming from, no matter where you're maneuvering throughout Kings Canyon. Always prepare for a gunfight, and you can do that by making sure your reticle is aimed at where you think enemies are going to be coming from. Next is going to be, this is probably the most important one, but it's called recoil control. I cannot explain how clutch it is to have recoil control on your guns. Yes, the recoil is predictive in this game, with the exception now to the R301, but what I think will be more beneficial for all of you is going into the training mode like we talked about, and working on your natural recoil with guns that don't have any attachments. If you can get good with the gun with no attachments, when you have attachments on that gun, it's going to make it much easier for you to control the recoil, because that's what they're designed to do. So go into training mode and work on your recoil control. Work on hitting every single bullet on one of those targets, the moving targets, the short range targets, the long range targets. Try to make sure that you're hitting every single shot, getting used to those guns that you main the most. Get used to that recoil control, because at the end of the day, the person who's able to control the recoil the most in that gunfight most likely is going to win, depending on, it's situational. But for the most part, if you guys are in a one-on-one in front of you and you have better recoil control than that guy, you're going to be able to win that gunfight. Now, once you have that knocked out, try movements that you would do in game and try to keep all your shots on target, right? So we talked about strafing. You want to make sure that you're trying to strafe and trying to recoil control at the same time. These little practices that you do when your friends are warming up are really going to set you apart from the average player that you're running into in Kings Canyon. So I really recommend you guys jump into training mode, get on those guns that you main, and work on that recoil control. Work on hitting every single one of those 18 bullets in that clip in the R301. Work on hitting all 4 of those shots in the wingman, because early game, that could save your life. Now, another one I want to talk about is when to stay and when to leave a gunfight, right? Staying in gunfights, there are times when you're losing a gunfight, and at that moment you have a chance to swing that gunfight in your favor by doing the unexpected and continuing to challenge that person. What it does is it does two things. One is it throws the enemy off guard, because either one, they got you really weak and they know that you're weak, and so they're going to push you, right? That means that they're usually sprinting, they're usually jumping, they're just trying to get to you because they don't want you to get that heal off. Or two, they're getting meds off because he thinks that you're doing the same thing. So they're not going to be really aiming down sight. They're going to be trying to get their battery off, maybe trying to get their med kit off. So what you want to do is you kind of want to re-challenge when you're low. It could get you killed, but it could also really turn the tide in the gunfight that you really wouldn't have won even if you tried to med up.
I've become the kill leader. Such a crass.
Another thing that I kind of coined, I haven't seen this before, and I call it the 3-shot rule. And this is really tough even for me at sometimes, but I'm gonna try to break it down as best as I can. So basically, if you land your first 3 shots with like an automatic, your first initial shot with the longbow, a peacekeeper, or a wingman on target, and they miss their first 3 shots or their first initial shot, stay in that gunfight. Your odds of winning that gunfight are pretty high unless you absolutely crap the bed with your aim. Now, the opposite of that is if you miss your first 3 shots and the enemy lands their first 3 shots on you, disengage, pop a sail, get your heals back up, and try to get into that gunfight again and land those first initial shots. Landing those first initial shots is key, because then you have to just recoil control like we talked about earlier. So yeah, it's kind of hard, right? Because there's times when you get in a gunfight, and even if you're losing, you kind of stick in that gunfight because you're like, I gotta try to beam this guy out. Maybe you should practice disengaging when you're losing that gunfight, getting your heals back up, bouncing back, and trying to land those first initial shots. It's something that's really tough to disengage from a fight that you're both in, but it's going to help you a lot, and especially when you're facing certain guns as well, like a devotion. You know, you want to try to disengage from that devotion before it hits its turbocharger, because you're going to die as soon as it hits its turbocharger. So work on disengaging, work on practicing that 3-shot rule, get those first 3 shots, try to stay in that gunfight, because most likely you know, you have the advantage initially. Another thing that, you know, is kind of a tricky thing and kind of situational is quick shielding. And this is basically, you know, you're in a really close quarters gunfight, you get hit a little bit, maybe pop off the shield cell. You know what I mean? Maybe, you know, go behind the door real quick, close the door, hold the door, try to get off a shield battery. There's little moments in games where you can get off a quick little shield cell. So try to work on those little sneaky heals, because that, you know, extra 10 HP, that extra shield cell could save your life and could help you get that gunfight. Those are all my tips for today. I hope you guys learned something. If you did, please leave a comment below on what you learned new. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and like the video. It's going to help me out and give me more motivation. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch the end of the video if you guys did. I'll see you guys soon. RETICLE is out.